Shalom uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. We are privileged this evening to continue our joint study of the ethics of the fathers, Pirkei Avot. Tonight's Mishna, Perek Aleph, Mishna Gimel, Chapter 1, Mishna 3. The Tana teacher of our Mishnah is a relatively unknown sage, a relatively unknown scholar. It's clear from our Mishnah that he was a main character in the transmission of the sacred tradition from generation to generation. Even though we have so few of his teachings and such limited information about this great Tana's life. In referring to the transmission of the Masorah tradition from one generation to the next generation, if you've never studied this section of Maimonides in his introduction to his famous code, or if you haven't viewed it recently, it may be worthwhile to restudy the introduction of Maimonides to his main halachic work, Hakdamat Harambam, the Mishneh Torah, Yad HaChazakah. When speaking of the rabbi of our Mishnah, Antigonos Ish Socho, as we'll presently study, when speaking of the rabbi of our Mishnah, Rambam writes, Antignos Uveit Dino Kibbelu Mishimon HaTzadik. It was Antignos together with his court, together with his group of scholars who received the tradition from Shimon HaTzadik. Although our Mishnah does not seem to write about the court or the academy or the tribunal of each of the key tradition transmitters, Rambam always in that text adds the words Ubeit Dino, Ubeit Dinam. It wasn't one or two people alone. They worked with other sages and scholars. Having said that, let us now proceed to the study of our Mishnah. Perek Aleph, Mishnah Gimel. Antignos Ish Socho Kibel Mishimon HaTzadik. Antignos of Socho, Ish Socho of Socho, received the tradition from Shimon HaTzadik. As you may recall, last week we spent a great deal of time speaking about Shimon HaTzadik here on Shimon HaTzadik Street, as you remember. Antignos was one of the chief, disciples, one of the chief recipients of the traditions of Shimon HaTzadik. What does Ish Socho mean? It could mean he lived in Socho. A person that lives in a certain community is called the man of that community, Ish Socho. Or it could mean, according to certain commentaries, Ish Socho. He was the main man of that community. He was the leader of Socho. He was the head. He was the outstanding personality of Socho. Socho is known to us from the book of Yehoshua, from the book of Joshua in the 15th chapter, where we read of the cities of the tribe of Yehudah, and seemingly Socho is one of those cities. His name is extremely intriguing to me. Antigonos. It does not sound, I don't think, it does not sound like a Hebrew name. It does not sound like a Jewish name. One of the earliest transmitters of our tradition. Sounds Greek to me. Antigonos, Antigonos? Isn't it unusual? If it's a Greek name, one wonders, and one has to study, why would the rabbis use Greek names? In our tradition, we pride ourselves with having kept Hebraic names, Jewish names, even in the exile in Egypt. The Midrash speaks about the pure names of the nation, and even the people born in Egypt had beautiful, pure Hebraic names, beautiful names of the Lashon HaKodesh. And Antigonos does not seem to fit that concept. I heard many, many people speaking about it. I saw several approaches. It's not the only name in Mishnah which is not Hebrew, but I think that we have to study different possibilities of explanation as to why he would use the name Antigonos. I remember once hearing from one of the outstanding rabbis in New York, may Hashem bless him. His name is Rabbi David Cohen of Pirkei Avot. I remember he said that maybe Antigonos is a combination of two words. Anti-genos. Anti-genos. Maybe he was the anti-Gnostic. And he discussed Rav Cohen. Maybe he chose this name to show that he was fighting against a certain concept in philosophy or in worship, or maybe by extension even religion. And Antigonos was the anti-Gnostic who was arguing and teaching against the Gnostics. I once saw that maybe he would emphasize the place of tradition. The Gnostics were very much known for their emphasis on reason. Now, we very much hold from reason. It's very much a Jewish concept, to study and to analyze. But it could be, if he's the first one after Shimon HaTzadik, and he's the one who's emphasizing the importance of tradition, then maybe he had to show that revelation was of such special value, and he would emphasize through his name maybe, or through his title, the place of tradition, the place of revelation, over the value of mere reason. Of course, if he was the main transmitter of tradition, he would be especially sensitive to the emphasis on tradition and revelation, not only Gnosticism, not only knowledge without any divine source. This is speculation. If someone has a better explanation for his name, Antigonos, they're surely welcome to share that information with us. Antigonos, Ish Socho Kibel Mishimon HaTzadik. Antigonos received this tradition from Shimon HaTzadik. Hu Haya Omer. And this is what he constantly said. Al tihiyu ka'avadim hamishamishim et harav al manat lekabel pras. There are different ways of worshiping God, And there are some people who they read in the Torah about all the great reward that a person will receive if they follow the pathways of God. And they feel, wow, this is a great opportunity to receive reward. I will follow the ways of God in order to receive all these great rewards. Says Antigonos, Al tiyu ka'avadim. Al tiyu ka'avadim hamishamishim et harav al manat lekabel pras. Don't be as servants. Don't be as workers, working for the master for the purpose, for the sake of receiving a reward. In other words, maybe your emphasis is, okay, I'm going to do all these proper actions. I'm going to follow the system. I'm going to follow this regimen because there's a great price. Allah, he says, Hevu ka'avadim hamishemeshim et harav shelo al manat lekabel pras. But rather, be as servants, be as workers who serve their master with no intention of receiving a reward. They feel such connection to their master. They feel such connection to the one who's telling them what to do. They don't need a reward. Just the fact that it's the will of that great being, that's good enough. The level of serving God out of love, not fear, not only for beneficial gain, just out of love. For instance, if your beloved mother asks you to travel a complete hour's journey, a complete hour away, to pick up her gown for the upcoming event. If you love her, if you're connected to your mother, if you want to please her, if you want to connect her, and if you understand it's important to her, You travel there immediately with a smile on your face, and you're excited just to keep the word of your mother. Your mother asked you to travel the journey of an hour. But if you hesitate and hesitate, if you explain that, well, you're so busy, and gas is so expensive, and I have so many appointments today, and maybe someone else could do it, Ma, and Ima, I'm not sure I'm the one, and then your mother says, well, I'll give you $100. Just please pick up the gown for me. I'll give you $100. Please go. If you do go at that point, even if you're only motivated by the $100, but okay, it's also an action of greatness. You've also fulfilled the mitzvah of honoring your mother. But if you go without the intention of the $100, you're on the level of Hasidut. You're on the level of the piety of the chapters of the fathers. The Hasidut piety of Antigonos, Ish Socho, Shelo al manat lekabel pras. Not only or not merely or not primarily for the purpose of receiving a reward. The Mishnah concludes with the following words: Vihi mora shamayim aleichem. Vihi mora shamayim aleichem. Even though Antigonos seems to be emphasizing serving God with love, the concluding sentence seems a bit unusual. He seems to be saying, and make sure that the fear of heaven is upon you. Several of the commentaries point out that doesn't seem to be the flow of the Mishnah. The flow of the Mishnah is let the love of God be upon you. Let the closeness of God, let the excitement of God, let the exhilaration of God. The fear of God. The fear of God is the opposite. The fear of God is, I'm afraid I'll be punished. I'll receive reward. I'll receive punishment. And it seems that even though Antigonos charges us with serving God out of love, nevertheless, vihi mora shamayim aleichem, with all the love in the world, we still have to remember that we're not merely volunteering our religious activities and religious services. We are required to follow these teachings. We are required to do them. We will be held responsible if we are not living up to our obligations. We have to find the way of striking that delicate balance between loving God and fearing God, between the level of closeness and the level of awe. Our Mishnah obligates, or at least encourages us, to serve God without awaiting a reward. It is interesting to note that in the somewhat parallel text in Tractate Nidarim, in the Talmudic section of Nidarim, page 62a, Samach Bet Amud Aleph, the rabbis teach, Tanya, we learned in a Baraita, Li'ahava et Hashem Elokecha. The Torah says in the 30th chapter of Deuteronomy, you shall love the Lord your God. Lishma b'kolo, to heed the teachings of God. L'davkabo, to cling to God. And the rabbis say, Shelo yomar adam, so that a person should not take the attitude, Ekra, you know why I'm going to study Bible? You know why I'm going to study Tanakh? Shikra'uni chacham. I would love to acquire the title chacham. Wow, look at this person. He's so learned in Mikra. Ekra, he'll receive the glory, the honor of a chacham. Eshneh. I will study Mishnah. I will study the teachings of the rabbis. Shikra'uni Rabbi. He's so interested in the title of rabbi. What great reward! He'll be called a scholar, he'll be called a rabbi. Ashanein. I will teach others. Sheheyeh zakein. Ve'yeshev b'yeshiva. And I'll have this distinguished place of nobility. Ela lemad me'ahava. The rabbis say something similar to our Mishnah. Lemad me'ahava. Learn the Torah out of love. Teach the Torah out of love. Not because of titles, not because of reward. But the last three words of that sentence there are so difficult to understand. V'sof, I quote, V'sof hakavod lavo. Eventually, you'll get the honor. B'sof hakavod lavo. Now, it's a bit confusing. The purpose of that sentence is teaching us that we should serve God out of love. So what are you telling me about honor? The whole thing is, don't worry, there's no yes honor, no honor. Sof hakavod lavo. What are you telling me about honor? And I heard this question from two different rabbis, at least. One who, unfortunately, is no longer living in this world. A great teacher, Rabbi Miller, Victor Miller, Zatzal in New York. And the Yibadel Chaim Tovim, one of the great rabbis here in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yoel Schwartz. And they both asked the same question. If the purpose of this teaching is to encourage us to serve God out of love, then why add the Sof HaKavod Lavo? Sof HaKavod Lavo is seemingly undermining the very teaching. And they both said it, each one in his own way, that you have to know that Sof HaKavod Lavo. That if you're going to just try to do things L'Shem Shamayim, who knows how little will be accomplished in this world. You need that fuel, you need that energy, you need that boost to know, yeah, there is kavod. But even so, al tihiyu ka'avadim ha'mishamishim et harav al menat lekabel pras. Perhaps that shouldn't be your main emphasis. Yeah, there will be kavod, but that's not what I'm focusing on right now. But just somewhere in your mind, no, there is reward, there is honor, there is glory, there are titles, there are accomplishments. B'sof hakavod lavo. I saw in one of the commentaries on Pirkei Avot, entitled "V'dibarta Bam." I have it here on the table. The author of Bogomilsky asks a seemingly phrased contradiction in Talmudic literature to our text here in Pirkei Avot. And this is what he says. I don't know if it's his own teaching or he's quoting, but this is his question. The question itself is, of course, found in very early sources. I don't know whose answer this is. The rabbis teach in several places in the Talmud. If you're interested, it's in Rosh Hashanah, Dalet Amud Aleph, Pesachim Chet, Amud Aleph, Bava Batra, Yud Amud Bet. In several places in the Talmud, we read that if someone designates a donation to charity, Ha'omer, Sela Zo Litzdaka. This donation, this $100, is designated for charity. Bishvil Sheychya B'ni. God forbid it should never happen to anyone. Let's say he has someone in his family. Let's say his son is not feeling well, and he says, "I'm donating this $100 to charity in order that my son should feel well. He should live and be well." Oh, he designates the $100 to charity. He says, "I'm giving this $100 to charity because I want a section in the world to come." Oh, she'eyeh ben ha'olam haba. So the rabbis teach, Harezeh tzaddik gamur. This person is an absolute, completely righteous person, an absolute tzaddik. Absolute tzaddik. He's doing it for a purpose. He wants to receive the blessing of the life of his son. He wants to receive a ticket to the world to come. What's tzaddik gamur? Antigonos, our great teacher, say, "Al to you." How does this fit? And why is he tzaddik gamur? That's surely a strange phrase. With tzaddik gamur, he's a complete tzaddik. What about everything else he's doing? All you have to do is give charity, and you become a tzaddik gamur. There are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of so many other activities of life that you have to do in order to become a tzaddik gamur. One act of charity makes you a tzaddik gamur. I saw, maybe it means tzaddik gamur in this particular action, not tzaddik gamur. His life is an act. He's now pronounced the perfectly righteous person. Let's say he's involved in every corruption in the world. Just because he gives charity makes him a tzaddik gamur. I also saw, maybe I heard more than once, that maybe the true version of the Gemara should be not tzaddik gamur, but tzedakah gemura. Even in our text it says tzaddik gamur. Maybe it means harei zo tzedakah gemura. This is complete charity. Don't think it's a blemish in the charity merely because he wants to receive a blessing for his child. But the Tosafist, the Balei Tosafot in Pesachim, they say, what do you mean tzaddik gamur? We learn in Pirkei Avot. We learned our Mishnah, Al tiyu kavadim hamshamshim et harav, al manat lekabel pras. And the Balei has Tosafot answer that it is only a problem if one pursues it only. They're not really interested in the mitzvah. And if they would not receive the reward, they would dismiss the mitzvah. Such a person is problematic, But if they would do the mitzvah anyway, they're just putting in an extra condition, that's acceptable. I saw in another place, maybe some people say, maybe there's a difference between commandments between people and God and people and other people. Maybe between people and God, you really need the proper level of intention. Not for reward. Maybe between people and other people, the most important result that we're interested in is that the other person should receive the blessing. The other person should receive the donation. Who cares why you're doing it? If you're giving him $100, just give him the $100. Maybe the intention is much less important in mitzvot shebein adam l'chaveiro, and maybe the example that's given here is bein adam l'chaveiro. However, there's a beautiful interpretation. There's a beautiful interpretation in this book called V'dibarta B'ham, and I want to read it to you. He says maybe it means, I can't think it's the pshat, but it's, I think, very beautiful. He says, Harei sel hazol tzedakah, al menat she'yehya b'ni, al menat she'yeh ben olam haba. He says, maybe this is a way of making the poor person feel better. Instead of giving charity and saying, oh, Nebuch, you're so poor, I have to give you charity. You make it sound as if it's a selfish action for yourself. You're covering over the shame of the recipient. That's why it's such a high level. The Gemara says that for giving tzedakah, one receives 6 blessings. And for saying comforting words to the poor, one receives an additional 11 blessings. For more important than the actual giving of tzedakah is the way it is given. The poor and the destitute that have to beg for alms are heartbroken and shattered. Instead of making you feel that they are on the receiving end and you're on the giving end, you should convey a sense of gratitude to the poor for giving you the opportunity to do a mitzvah. Thus, the Gemara could be explained to mean that if while giving charity, you're giving charity to the poor person, and the person is so embarrassed about charity, you say, well, I'm giving this because of the benefit that's in store for me. I'm not giving it for you. I'm doing it for myself. Through the fulfillment of this mitzvah, for the fulfillment of this charity, my son will live. I'll receive a section of the world. It could be, could be he doesn't even have a son, right? He's just saying it. He says it in order to make the poor person feel better. Such a person is a tzaddik gamur because he makes the recipient feel like the recipient is the one who's doing him a favor. May we all merit today, each of us, all of us together, the Jewish people in the entire world, to serve God properly in the highest levels of fulfillment of the teachings of Antigonos with the highest levels of altruistic considerations. Thank you so much for listening. Shalom.